great to be at
Deep
Learning Indaba in Dakar, having a fantastic time. Day 5, I think. Today, it's always hard to kind of remember what day it is when you get into the heat of the Indaba. There's so much happening, so much going on. And one of the things going on is this conversation we're about to have here, trying to understand the AI landscape, compute landscape in the continent and what's happening in the different parts in the region with regards to computing infrastructure, data centers, which is an area you work on. And maybe we can just quickly start by introducing ourselves. So you go ahead.
Sure, thanks Albert for the introduction. So my name is Krupa Suchak. I work in the data center industry across Europe, Middle East and Africa. I provide technical consultancy around data centers and I'm based in London within a real estate company. So the interesting thing here is that the valuation of a data center land parcel, land bank, increases drastically when it's identified suitable to build a data center. So yeah, there's a lot of mission critical components that we assess when we're building a data center, and we provide a lot of advisory on site selection for that reason.
And maybe we can just start by defining what a data center is,
Yep.
because recently with the whole growth of AI, generative AI and all these kind of things, everyone is talking about data centers, everyone is talking about compute. Kenya is planning to invest, I don't know how many million shillings in building a data center. What is a data center and why is it essential?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So essentially, a data center is a facility that houses all the mission critical components needed to make data function, essentially. So what do we mean by that? We're referring to data storage, data computation, and network trafficking of data, essentially.
Okay.
In simple words, it is the powerhouse of all your data requirements.
And so I probably forgot to introduce myself. My name is Albert. I am an AI researcher, AI engineer, AI scientist. It's kind of hard to know what is what nowadays. I work in a pharmaceutical company, but prior to that, I spent a lot of time doing AI research in HPC, which is essentially high performance computing, or what we call supercomputers. I think I spent about 4 years at Barcelona Supercomputing Center doing my PhD, and then spent another 3 years at ULI Supercomputing Center as a research scientist in HPC for AI or AI for HPC, depending on how you look at it. And so I've spent quite a lot of time working on HPC and whatnot. Now I'm mostly working on cloud, which is another important aspect of this infrastructure that we're going to be talking about. And so maybe we can just quickly start by providing an overview of the landscape of the data center industry in Africa at the moment. And what's the hype all about and why it makes sense and what are the numbers?
Yeah, I would like to take this back to why do we talk about this today, right? So digital technology has been around since the .com era. But what has actually given growth or driven the growth of data infrastructure on the continent is the COVID-19 pandemic, right? Because of that, a lot of connectivity, mobile usage, as well as internet usage on the continent has increased. And over the years, this has been accelerated by the AI technologies, right? So we have been seeing a lot of adoption of ChatGPT and the applications that would actually solve African problems. I think for that reason, we need also a large number of compute resources, which is where you can help us out in Africa. But generally speaking, I think Africa as a continent is lagging behind the rest of the world when it comes to building the right digital infrastructure needed to service its economy. So putting this into perspective, let's see, in terms of numbers and figures, there are 122 known data center facilities across Africa as of 2022 that is servicing a population of 1.4 billion and has a capacity of 250 megawatts. And then when you compare that to Europe, right, there's 1,240 data centers known, which has an IT capacity of about 8,300 megawatts, and it's servicing almost half the population, which is 0.7 billion people, right? So in that sense, when you look at it, Europe is 33 times more in terms of IT capacity servicing usage
Yeah.
per population compared to like Africa,
Yeah.
right? And that tells you the state of digital adoption and technology within the two continents.
Regions, yeah.
And I think the interesting thing here, which I've learned over the years, is that a lot of data, which is actually being created, generated, and utilized within Africa, when stored on the cloud, is being trafficked through regional component, I think, through continents close to the proximity of Africa.
Yeah.
And so to speak, we have some very important clusters which are being built within Europe or have grown in Middle East, like Marseille and Riyadh, that are IXP stations. And by IXP, I'm talking about internet exchange points, which have strong connectivity from subsea cable landing station, as well as internet connectivity throughout their continent to Africa. And a lot of these data center operators who build data centers leverage on this connectivity and build an entire data center strategy in remote countries like Europe and Middle East to service Africa as a continent. So from your perspective, right, in terms of cloud and compute resources, what is your perspective? Do we actually have sufficient infrastructure and resources to service our continent?
It's, of course, like, maybe we can start by just giving a quick perspective of how things are at the moment. I work in HPC, or I worked in HPC for a long time, high performance computing. And of course, there are HPC centers in Africa. Like I was mentioning earlier, South Africa has a HPC center. I used to meet a lot of people from South Africa when attending HPC conferences. And they are one of the few countries in Africa that actually has a HPC cluster, which is basically a supercomputer. And I think now we have Morocco. But increasingly, we're realizing that a lot of the compute work that needs to be done for AI and these new workloads that we're dealing with need these supercomputing facilities. So a lot of countries are embracing this. Nigeria now has an AI strategy that, at the core seems to recognize the importance of compute and has a plan to develop that, at least for Nigeria and that region. And if you read a lot of these AI strategies from so many countries, they also seem to recognize the importance of, supercomputing, or let's just call it compute for their countries or for that particular region. Unfortunately, there aren't that many supercomputing centers in Africa that I know of. I know South Africa, like I mentioned. I know we have Morocco, and Nigeria now has a strategy towards getting one. In Kenya, we have not a supercomputing facility per se, but a national sort of cluster that is being proposed and worked on, and some universities can access that. But still, our computing capacity in the continent is still very limited, let's say. And but I believe as we're seeing more work being done in the continent around AI and these technologies, we're going to see more being added into the so to say grid, but not grid as per se. And compare that to other countries or to other regions like Europe, like we were mentioning earlier. Of course, the difference is huge, right? Europe has, I don't know now how many supercomputing centers. They're working on their first exascale supercomputer that is coming online, I think, sometime later this year, and a lot of that happening in the continent. So we're not yet there, but I think we're heading there, and that's why we meet at the Indaba to discuss this kind of issues, see way forward, talk to people interested in working in these areas, and all that.
Yeah. I think you're very much on point. As a first step to solving some of these challenges, right, I think is identifying what resources we have and enabling some form of resource sharing to enable and understand how students can actually utilize and share their resources that are existing and available.
Absolutely. Yeah. Honestly, one of the issues I find is we have these pocket clusters in different
Yeah.
universities and different places, but nobody really knows
Yeah.
where they are, or just a few people know where they
Yeah.
are. And I think if we could find a way to sort of start that transparency of this is how much compute we have in this particular lab, this is how much compute we have in this particular university,
Yeah.
and how can it be shared, how can it be used
Yeah.
for more research and whatnot. That would be a great first step, because at the end of the day, compute is very expensive, right? Let's face it. You probably have the numbers than I do, but compute is very expensive. Building a national supercomputer costs upwards of €500 million, like an exascale supercomputer, for example. And you can't do this as an individual countries, especially knowing our budgets and the kind of problems we have. I mean, choosing between building a supercomputer and building a hospital, I'd probably choose building a hospital first, right? But again, this needs to be in our national strategy, because this is becoming increasingly important. I always say that compute is a critical infrastructure, and countries need to view it as such. And so identifying all these pockets of compute that we have in the continent could be a really good first step. Like, I would love to know how much compute is available in Kenya for the public researchers, right? Or just university researchers, right? Apart from the private sector, and how can I access this kind of resources available and whatnot. But yeah, that's an initial first step, I think, apart from adding more compute to the continent. But to go back to your original point, of course, we mentioned that, I didn't explain this, but one of the things that we host in a data center is, these supercomputers and or cloud infrastructure, or a bunch of these. What's the distribution of data centers in the continent at the moment?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I think you will see a very uneven spread of data centers across the continent. So yes, there is 122 known facilities on the continent, yet there are 5 major markets which have seen the greatest number of growth in data center capacity. So I think the 5 major countries are South Africa, Morocco, Egypt, Nigeria, and Kenya. Of all these 5, only South Africa has experienced a lot of digital growth, mainly because they have the presence of all 5 well-known cloud service deployments, which is AWS, Microsoft, Google Cloud Services, Alibaba, and Oracle. So I think that really helps to have tech giants and big cloud services come and actually take residency within these countries to enable, one, data protection, right? Because it adheres to the data localization policy, but it also gives opportunities of jobs and access to easy data compute resources, which is kind of very good, especially from a machine learning and practitioner's perspective, because you always want to train model closer to the model itself, right? That enables low latency, which makes it everything faster. Because in comparison, it could take months and months to train data training sets, right? And having clusters closer with large numbers of GPUs can reduce it by drastic amounts of months.
Absolutely, and I would say the same, like when it comes to supercomputing and these large clusters. At this point, I think one of the, apart from identifying all these pockets available in different countries, a regional approach would be very good. Like you can see what's happening in the EU. They realize that one country building a supercomputer is insanely expensive. So a better approach is, can we come together, and build a machine or like a facility that can then be used by people in that particular region, right? So that's kind of like sort of like the European approach. They have, of course, individual countries do their things, but we have these centers that are supported by the European Union, and then all researchers from across the continent, from across Europe, can access this kind of supercomputing facility. I think that could be a way forward for regions like East Africa, for example, because we already have regional integration within these regions. And so some of the issues could be solved from that point, let's say. But this is going to take time, right? And a lot of this kind of conversations starting to happen, and people realizing that this needs a joint approach and not an individual country approach or an individual company and whatnot. And of course, the growth of these data centers now, they made an announcement, I think, this year, that they're going to build a data center in Kenya. one more, and I think we have a couple already. Um, this kind of initiatives and this kind of moves are helping a lot in terms of that, because at the end of the day, what I mean, building a data center is not just the building, right? That is housing. There's a lot of other critical things required to run such a thing, right? You need power, you need fiber optic connection, you need the technical know-how to run and operate these systems, and that's all needs to happen for so it's a bunch of different things that need to happen for
moving
this,
parts to come together.
to come together. I mean, for this thing to move forward. But at the end of the day, I feel like we're heading there. I'm always very optimistic.
Yeah.
I like to see the moves that are happening and whatnot. And maybe you can highlight a little bit more on where you see the development of these data centers going, and what I know it's hard to predict the future, right? What are the timelines? What's going to happen? And what does the future hold in terms of data centers, and what are you in your company doing for this particular thing?
Solving the challenges. Yeah. I mean, I love what you said about resource sharing, right? But to get to that point where we're able to help each other out with resource sharing, I think the first step to this massive problem that you've identified is to actually understand what resources we have on ground, right? So we've built a platform. We have identified locations of data centers and provided market intelligence on what is available in terms with specifics and configurations of that particular data center. I think we've initially started with providing the locations of GPU clusters so that it's easily available to students at the Deep Learning Indaba. And generally, these are compute resources which are heavily subsidized for academics and practitioners on ground, yet students are not well aware of it. So a lot of students are actually very excited to identify and know that they have free compute resources in different countries across Africa. So that, I think, is a good first move.
First move to that.
Yes, and then we want to layer it with additional information on existing data centers, which are not really well known and are not put on the map yet across the globe, right? So let's highlight and identify what resources we have internally. And as you mentioned, very importantly, we need the other peripheral infrastructure needed to build the right data center. So we need that knowledge and that data on additional peripheral structures to identify what are the right locations to build in Africa. I mean, if you think about it, the entire data center industry is moving towards becoming green and more sustainable, right? And shying away from our dependency on coal and power, petroleum, right? And oil and gas. So that means that they're looking for renewable sources of energy. And what's better than Africa, right? Yeah. There's so many countries on the continent that actually have a lot of renewable sources of energy, but we're really lucky in terms of the resources. We have open air, wind, a lot of sunshine, and good waters with waves and everything around us. So let's tap into these renewable sources of energy and enable to build the right data center.
Awesome. And one of the things I'm really excited about this year's Deep Learning Indaba is for the first time we have a workshop on AI infrastructure, which is basically the cloud and the HPCs. We're lucky to have the support of the South African Center for High Performance Computing, using their supercomputer to give practical tutorials on how to use these systems, how to scale models across multiple GPUs, how to work with cloud and HPC resources. Because like we mentioned earlier, one of the important things we need to do is build capacity for usage. It's one thing to have a GPU, and it's one thing to know how to use it efficiently, right? And that's one of the things I'm excited that we are working on this year. We have a nice workshop scheduled
tomorrow.
For tomorrow, and this is one way forward, and I really hope that we can. I mean, the mission of Deep Learning Indaba is to strengthen machine learning in Africa, and one of the ways that this happens is through these conversations and building communities around particular research or interest areas. And now, cloud compute and HPC is becoming that. And I'm super happy that we're able to do this at this year's Indaba, and hopefully we can continue with this conversation next year. So maybe parting shots before we go from you. I don't think I have much to say, but parting shots from you.
Oh yeah, well, yes, I think we clearly have a need for building the right infrastructure to capacitate our students and practitioners alike to, compute the right training models and resources. And I think we're on the path. I think
Absolutely.
we're in a place where we're really excited about the potential and opportunities we have. There clearly are challenges around this, but having the community that supports you and working together, I think we can build the resources that we need with the support of the right technical people on ground, getting the information from students and building the right communities that can help us spread the word, as you mentioned, and advocating for it, right? Like
Yeah.
we need to make sure and advocate for use of local compute resources that would help us strengthen our community.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah, and maybe the last thing I would say is when we say compute in Africa, what does this mean for us, right? I'm so glad that we have so many people at Deep Learning Indaba looking at different ways to achieve, good models, good results
yeah.
from, very limited data, and maybe that's also one of the things they're trying to innovate around, or that's one of the things that they're working on, like better algorithms to work with our systems, maybe with less compute, or with innovating around compute, be it algorithms or, how to do things differently. There's a lot of that happening within the community. And so like I usually say, the pillars of AI is essentially, data, great algorithms, and the right infrastructure. And I'm glad to see all these three sort of being looked at the Indaba right now, and different people working to solve the different aspects of this. So I'm very optimistic about the future as well. I'm very optimistic about what's going on here. And I'm super glad that we are having this conversation.
Yeah, great conversation, Albert.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you guys.